Hello, welcome to Loremaster's Lair. I'm your Loremaster, here today to continue on with our Eastern exploration / excuse to talk about the Eastern deities of Golarion, all in celebration of the release of the Impossible Lands. With the book's general release set for this coming week, this week will be this month's God video. And who better than the Master of Masters himself, Irori, to be this month's pick. I had originally planned to cover him a few months ago, but with the fact he was likely to be given some prominence in the new region book, thought this month would be the perfect place for him. But either way, let's get started. But first, let's help perfect your mind by showing you where you can find this information yourself. As always, the journey begins with a single step, and that first step is Gods and Magic for both editions. Then the real training begins in the 5th book of the Jade Regent Adventure Path, titled The Tide of Honor. A second rep was found then in Inner Sea Gods. I always mix that up. It's Inner Sea Gods. Then we start the real hard training in Faiths of Balance, and the area of the domain is laid out in Planar Adventures. And pushing farther, we have Divine Anthology and Paths of Prestige. Irori was a simple man from Vudra who spent his whole life to reach a singular goal: perfection. He continued working his body, his mind, and his soul until he achieved the impossible. Immortal, no other divine help, rose to godhood. Now, standing at the pinnacle of peak, he works to encourage mortals to follow in his footsteps, hoping they too can reach the distant heights beyond a mere life of mortality someday. Irori does not appear in art. His followers know there is no way a mere image can match the perfection of the deity of self-perfection, and therefore will not commit blasphemy by pretending that they can do so. That said, people have found success in Styler's writings, especially with the fact that in at least one language, his name is the same forward and back, eventually evolving into a meditative symbol known as the Master's Rebus. When he appears, he does so as a flawless man of Vudrani descent, no hair except a single long braid, and wearing but a robe and sandals. He is also known to speak through statues if it is the best method of communication at the time. Who better to give sagely advice than sages of the past, am I right? Irori's works to inspire his followers to follow along in his footsteps, working to obtain perfection. He does this through having them perfect what is known as their triune self. This is, of course, unrelated to the Starfinder deity. The triune self, consists of the body, the mind, and the soul. No heart, I am afraid, but still have most of them. One needs to focus on these 3 things, Irori teaches, to reach perfection. Ways to perfect the body include martial arts, which is, of course, why he is unofficially the god of monks. Perfecting the mind includes learning much knowledge, which is why one of his domains is history. And through meditation or other similar activities, one can mold their soul to perfection. That said, the journey is long to go from the state of imperfection to the state of perfection, which is why Irori teaches moderate change. To slowly work the body, the mind, and the soul, instead of dashing headfirst into expectations of perfection. That is how the Master insists people need to grow, and the surest way to reach perfection. The three big groups which follow Irori are mystics, ascetics, and martial artists. Each person walks their own path towards enlightenment, but these three paths are the ones most connected to Irori's faith over others. Specifically for ascetics, it is said Irori himself was one of them, and therefore there are various sects who follow different rules and focuses in order to cultivate the purity of the soul. Outside of them, some worship him not for his connection to perfection, but to history and preservation of wisdom, and worship him as a god of knowledge of various scientific fields. Some followers go to various extreme measures to connect to the masses, including self-mummification at the time of their death, or devoting themselves to traveling the plains, a practice that they refer to as walking with the master. And at this point is the perfect place to stop and talk about a first side tangent, the part of the show where hard work does pay off. While there is no champion of purity book for either neutral or evil, that does not mean gods like Irori do not have their own unique champions. Known as, well, champions of Irori, on the nose a bit. They are exactly what you would expect them to be, a combination of monks and paladins. They wander the world as those who pursue justice, truth, and the path of perfection, always working to better themselves, but also to share the path of Irori with the world, smiting down those who would do wrong, or who are chaotic. It's actually chaos which is their enemy. But while they are always working to perfect their knowledge, their skills, and their martial arts, they also have the powers to smite with one fluid punch, protect their allies from damage, and strike with but a single touch attack. Now, continuing on, would you be at all surprised if I told you the clergy of Irori was mostly monks? I do not think so. Priests tend to avoid drugs and alcohol, though some sects instead teach that these can be used to expand one's mind when taken in moderation and on a regular basis. Self-control and everything and all that. Clergy prefer to operate on near poverty levels, eschewing worldly possessions for the path to enlightenment. The only exceptions, of course, being the maintained temple of their god. Irori challenges himself both physically and mentally in life. So now his priests attempt challenges which last at least a year at the shortest, each one designed to slowly push themselves past the limits. A typical day you would expect for a priest of Irori involves simple meditation, with occasional breaks for food and cleaning, but usually little else. As a deity of monks, not surprised Irori's temples take the form of traditional monasteries. Here, followers are isolated from the outside world, focused on their path to perfection. The leader of any temple is determined by the one who is closest to self-perfection, whether it's that metric is determined by some competition of meditation, or more cutthroatly, through traditional martial arts duels. There are also various temples which are devoted to a single martial arts school, and are actually common in areas where the poor are unable to use magic. Which of course brings us to our second side tangent. What are martial arts? We all have an idea of what martial arts are. We have all seen at least one kung fu movie or another. But martial arts tends to be more than that. Part of the formation of Eastern martial arts was so traveling monks had a way to protect themselves from bandits, while still, of course, keeping to the vows of not killing. That said, other martial arts were developed to be a little more lethal. The one thing of note is that many martial arts is that they were mostly not developed by people who were professional warriors, and therefore have other focuses outside of combat. Some were for entertainment, like early forms of boxing and wrestling in Greece. Some also focused on health and healing, many Eastern martial arts also connected to medicine. And some are used to focus the spirit, they themselves being considered forms of meditation. Irori's realm is a serene circle, a garden with an axis filled with winding footpaths. The few buildings here take on the appearance of Rudrani temples and monasteries, though there is a claim that the buildings appear in any form they need to be. All the divine servitors of the Masters walk these paths, discussing philosophy and practicing ways to perfect one's body, mind, and soul. However, this is a temporary rest stop for most. As a deity whose faith encourages reincarnation, many of these followers have passed through the gardens multiple times, still walking their own paths to enlightenment. Now it's time for the miscellaneous information. First, where is Irori worshipped? Well, first he is a deity originating from Fudra, so of course there. As for the inner sea region, he is worshipped all along the coast of the Ubari Ocean. The most standout, of course, is Jamure, but two of the other three locations in the Impossible Lands, namely Nex and the Mana Race, have decent-sized congregations. Again, the reason I am choosing to cover him this month is for that fact alone. His faith is also spread north to the areas of Katapesh, Osirian, and Kadira, until finally finding a presence in Absalom. His faith also spread east to the Dragon Empires, finding a home in both Goka and the Wall of Heaven, and from there the nations of neighboring Hongol and Lingshan. As for other nations found in, well, I don't know how to spread their what. Hongol, while distant from the other nations, is still adjacent to a Wall of Heaven, so I can see that. But to the Taldor colony of Amandar, the Samurai nation of Minkai, and the Dragon nation of Zahoi, not sure how his name spread there. Either way, as for holidays, they are something that one sets on their own, as one follows their own path. Though, some common celebrations are common to multiple branches of the faith. One example being the Harvest Feast. The Master's Holy Book, Unbinding the Fetters, is a book that gives instructions on things like meditation and diet, in order to help one achieve their enlightenment. Though, of course, one book is not going to thoroughly describe the Master's faith, but we do have others at our disposal. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Side Tangent 3, where we return to our old friend, the majestic book of the Grand Ascendants. Refresher since it's been a while. This book was originally written by someone whose goal was to graft together the worship of the mortals who became gods into a single faith, often with slightly different worship practices than the mainstream. For Roy, the chapter on him refers to him as the Prime Scholar, and focuses more on the mind part of the Triune Soul. It is a well-guarded book, placed right below his holy book, but the book is noted to be better at advising others on the path to follow to cultivate the Triune Soul than it is to help you cultivate your own. And for our final side tangent, of course Irori has a divine fighting style. It is actually the best known one. The Woven Fist is one of the first places amongst Lords from their fighting forms, and various drills from their childhood memories come from the book. While it's mostly found in monasteries to Irori, it is effective enough that less than noble hands have passed around copies of it. The fighting style is a balanced fist, which allows one to do the average damage to the opponent. And, with enough training, it eventually allows one to make any critical hit do maximum damage. That is a mighty blow indeed. And at last, let's look at those who walk beside Irori, both as divine servitors and as gods. First divine servitors we have Sixth Rebirth, a stone giant covered in various scars. He is almost always in meditation, but his strikes can tear through steel. Then there is Cheo Chem, who takes the form of an intelligent tiger, and who claims that this is the first time they have reincarnated as an intelligent animal. Through the various experiences, she has learned to pick up dozens of mortal languages, and therefore makes a pretty good diplomat to Irori. Finally, Irori's herald is the Old Man, who takes the form of simply that. He is a wise master, training many students trying to achieve perfection, even watching over them for several different reincarnations. If he is summoned, however, he usually takes on a more trickster role, especially since you've kind of already proven that to him that you have skilled enough to be able to pay him. As for other deities, Irori's own beliefs in non-interference, and him being from Vudra, where respecting interface is the norm, he prefers to stay out of the way of other deities. There are exceptions, of course. He dislikes Asmodeus and his corruption of those who might have a chance of reaching enlightenment. He looks at the Starstone Trio and believes that they cheated to reach their godhood, though of course he is too polite to actually say or act on these opinions. And he was once a great friend of Eridan before, well, we've said dozens of times now. And that brings us to the end of today's video. For those keeping track, we only have a few more of the main trolling left, and I should hopefully be able to finish them up by the middle of next year. But Irori was the last god video for the year, what with how I'm going to spend November. How I'm going to spend December. We already know how I'm spending November. That said, it's not like we are fully done with deities. But it's going to be like last week where we dealt with an area as an excuse to slip in some local gods. And that video is also going to be in a couple weeks, because it just so happens that some of the preliminary information from the new Impossible Lands book has made me move a video a little earlier. So expect a visitor coming in with a few items next week. See you then.